The first thing I noticed was the blue SUV parked in my driveway. It belonged to my mother-in-law. The second thing I noticed was the moving truck. For a few seconds, I just sat behind the wheel of my car and stared at my house. I had been gone for 6 days. 6 days. My father had undergone surgery in Ohio, and I had flown out to stay with him until he was stable enough to go home. My husband, Michael, had kissed me goodbye at the airport. "Don't worry about anything here, Sarah," he'd said. "I've got it covered." Apparently, he had. There were cardboard boxes stacked beside my front door. A strange patio chair sat on my porch. And through the living room window, I could see my mother-in-law's enormous cream-colored lamp sitting where my reading chair used to be. I grabbed my phone. 3 missed calls from Michael. 1 text. "We need to talk before you come inside." I read it twice. Then I opened my car door. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I walked straight toward my own front door. Karen opened it before I could put my key in the lock. She smiled. That was the moment I knew whatever had happened was worse than I thought. Karen was 67 and had perfected the kind of smile that looked polite until you knew her well enough to recognize the insult underneath it. "Oh," she said. "You're back early." I looked past her. My flight was exactly when I said it would be. Her smile tightened. Behind her, half my living room had disappeared. My books were gone from the shelves. The framed photograph of my father and me was missing from the fireplace mantel. Karen's porcelain figurines had replaced it. "Where are my things?" She crossed her arms. "Michael thought it would be easier if we made the transition while you were away." "What transition?" Footsteps sounded behind her. Michael appeared at the end of the hallway. My husband of 11 years looked like a teenager who had been caught stealing money from his mother's purse. "Sarah." I stepped inside. Karen didn't move at first. I looked directly at her. "Move." She did. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "I wanted to explain this before you got upset." I almost laughed. "Before I got upset?" "Mom sold her condo." I stared at him. "What does that have to do with my furniture?" Karen answered for him. "I'm living here now." There are moments when anger arrives like fire. Mine didn't. Mine arrived like ice. I set my suitcase beside the stairs. Temporarily. Michael looked at his mother. That tiny glance told me everything. "No," he said. I waited. He swallowed. "We've decided Mom should have the house." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. I honestly wondered whether exhaustion had made me misunderstand him. "You've decided what?" Karen sighed dramatically. "Sarah, please don't turn this into a scene." I looked at her. Then at Michael. "My husband just told me that the two of you decided to give away the house I live in, and you're worried I'm going to make a scene?" Michael stepped closer. "Nobody is throwing you onto the street." "How generous. We can get an apartment." I stared at him. He kept talking. That was always Michael's mistake. When he was nervous, he filled silence with words. "Mom needs stability. The condo stairs were getting difficult. This place has the downstairs bedroom. The neighborhood is safer. Her doctors are closer. And therefore she gets our house? She needs it more than we do." Karen smiled again. "Exactly." I turned toward her. "You sold your condo before discussing this with me?" Her expression changed. Just slightly. "I discussed it with my son." There it was. Not your husband. My son. That distinction would become very important. Michael followed me into the kitchen. "Sarah, just listen." "No. Please." I turned around. "What exactly did you give her?" He hesitated. "The house." "You keep saying that." "I'm asking what you actually did." Karen entered behind him. "We signed everything Friday." "Everything." My stomach tightened. "What did you sign?" Michael pulled a folder from the kitchen counter. I recognized our attorney's logo. That surprised me. I opened the folder. There were documents concerning a transfer of Michael's interest in the residence to a family trust benefiting Karen. I read the first page, then the second. Then I started understanding what Michael believed he had done. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was fascinated. Who prepared this? Daniel. Daniel Cooper had handled several financial matters for Michael's small construction company. He was competent, which meant I already suspected something Michael didn't. Did Daniel run a title search? Michael frowned. What? A title search. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake. Michael owns the house. I looked at her. Does he? The room became very quiet. Michael gave a nervous laugh. Sarah, don't do this. I closed the folder. Do what? Play games. I smiled for the first time since arriving home. You're right. I picked up my suitcase. I'm exhausted. We'll talk tomorrow. Karen blinked. You're staying. I looked around my kitchen. Yes, Karen. Then I looked directly at Michael. For tonight, I am. I didn't sleep beside my husband that night. I locked myself in the guest bedroom upstairs and opened my laptop. At 11:18 p.m., I emailed our attorney, Rebecca Collins. Not Daniel. Rebecca. The attorney Michael apparently had forgotten existed. Rebecca had represented my father for almost 20 years. More importantly, she had handled the purchase of the property beneath the house. People hear our house and assume everything connected to it belongs to both spouses. Our situation was different. Very different. The house Michael and I lived in had been built 7 years earlier. But the land had belonged to my grandmother. When she died, she left it to my father. My father later transferred it to me. Only me. The deed had never contained Michael's name. When we decided to build, my father had insisted that I protect the property. Michael agreed. At the time, he had hugged me and said, "It's family land. It should stay yours." The construction financing was more complicated. Michael's company contributed money. I contributed substantially more. But legally, the underlying property remained mine. There were agreements governing Michael's financial interest in improvements. He had an interest. He did not have the magical ability to hand my property to his mother. At 11:43, Rebecca replied, "Do not sign anything. Call me at 8 a.m. I smiled. For the first time that day, I slept. At breakfast, Karen was drinking coffee from my favorite mug. It was ridiculous that this bothered me almost as much as the legal documents. She had also moved my coffee maker. Where's Michael? Work. She didn't look up. I opened a cabinet. My dishes had been rearranged. You've been busy. Karen smiled into the mug. I like things organized. So do I. Well, Michael said you wouldn't mind. That sentence summarized 11 years of marriage better than anything else could have. Michael said you wouldn't mind. Michael had used those words when Karen joined our anniversary dinner. When she stayed with us for 3 weeks instead of 1. When he loaned her money without telling me. When she criticized my cooking at Thanksgiving. When she invited relatives to our backyard without asking. Michael always volunteered my patience, my time, my money, my home, and then expected me to be gracious because the decision had already been made. I poured coffee. Karen watched me. So when will you start looking at apartments? I took a slow sip. I'm not. Her eyebrows rose. Michael said. I know what Michael said. You can't stay here indefinitely. I almost admired her confidence. Karen, how much did you get for your condo? Her face changed. That's private. Where's the money? Also private. I nodded. Interesting. What exactly are you implying? Nothing. I smiled. Yet? At 8 sharp, I called Rebecca from my car. I explained everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked, did you sign any transfer documents? No. Did you authorize Michael to act for you? No. Did you amend the property agreement? No. She exhaled. Then Michael has a problem. Not we. Michael. That word felt strangely comforting. Rebecca asked me to photograph every document in the folder. I sent them. 20 minutes later, she called back. Her voice had changed. Sarah, these papers don't transfer ownership of your land. I thought so. They appear to transfer whatever assignable financial interest Michael believes he has in the improvements. So Karen doesn't own my house. Not based on what you've sent me. I leaned back against the driver's seat. But there's something else, Rebecca said. What? The document represents that certain permissions have been obtained from the property owner. My fingers tightened around the phone. I gave no permission. I know. Did Michael sign that representation? Yes. Silence. Then Rebecca said, don't confront him yet. That surprised me. Why? Because I want the complete file from Daniel first. What are you thinking? I'm thinking your husband may have made promises he couldn't legally make. I looked toward the house. Karen was standing behind the living room curtain, watching me. Rebecca? Yes. Get everything. I will. Michael came home at 6. Karen had cooked dinner. She sat in my usual chair. I said nothing. Michael seemed relieved by my silence. That almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. How's your dad? He asked. Recovering. Good. Karen passed him potatoes. The three of us ate like a normal family while a legal grenade sat beneath the table. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. So, Sarah, I found some apartments. Already? I thought we could look Saturday. Yeah. He smiled cautiously. There's a 2-bedroom near downtown. Nice gym. Balcony. And what happens to the furniture? We'll take whatever Mom doesn't need. Karen didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. I put down my fork. What about the money we put into this house? And that was when my anger finally became a plan. Michael sighed. We'll figure that out. Will we? Yes. How much did your mother pay you for your supposed interest? Karen froze. Michael stared at me. What? You transferred something to her. Was it a gift? It's family. That wasn't my question. His jaw tightened. Mom helped me with the company years ago. How much? Sarah. How much? Karen slammed her fork onto the plate. You interrogate him like he's a criminal. I looked at her. No, Karen. Then I turned back to Michael. I'm asking my husband why he disposed of a marital financial interest without telling me. Nobody spoke. Michael finally whispered, $200,000. And suddenly, the story got much bigger. $200,000? Michael nodded. Karen's face went pale. I looked between them. Your mother paid you $200,000? It wasn't exactly like that. Then explain exactly what it was like. Michael pushed his plate away. Her condo sold for around $480. Karen snapped, Michael. He ignored her. She gave the company $200,000. My pulse slowed. His construction company had been struggling for almost a year. He told me business was tight. He had not told me it was $200,000 tight. So this wasn't about her needing a downstairs bedroom. She does need one. But she gave you $200,000. It was an investment. In exchange for this house? Michael rubbed his forehead. We were trying to solve 2 problems. There it was. A business rescue disguised as family kindness. Karen got a house. Michael got cash. And apparently, I got an apartment. I stood. Where's the money now? In the company. All of it. Most of it. Most? That word landed heavily. How much is left? Sarah, don't. How much? He looked down. About $70,000. I felt something inside me go completely still. $130,000 had disappeared in less than a week. Karen looked at her son. Even she seemed surprised. What do you mean 70? Michael didn't answer. And for the first time, Karen and I were staring at him with exactly the same expression. The next morning, Rebecca called. I have Daniel's file. I shut my office door. And? Daniel warned Michael in writing that he could transfer only whatever rights he actually possessed. I closed my eyes. So Daniel protected himself. Very carefully. Did Michael tell him I agreed? Yes. My eyes opened. Rebecca continued. He forwarded an email claiming you were aware of the arrangement. What email? I'll send it. Seconds later, it arrived. The message was from Michael to Daniel. Sarah understands the plan and has no objection. She's with her father right now, so I don't want to bother her with paperwork until she gets back. I read it 3 times. 11 years. That was how long I had trusted this man. And there it was in 2 sentences. Not confusion. Not miscommunication. A lie. Rebecca spoke softly. Sarah? I'm here. There is another issue. Of course there is. The $200,000. What about it? Daniel's notes indicate Karen believed she was purchasing a secured interest connected to the property. I stared through my office window. Does she know Michael can't give her ownership of the land? According to Daniel, he repeatedly told them the title situation needed clarification. Did they clarify it? No. Why? Michael said you would handle it when you returned. I laughed. I couldn't help it. So their entire plan depended on me coming home and signing away my property. Yes. And they moved her in before asking. Yes. I stopped laughing. Then I think it's time they finally ask. That evening, Michael came upstairs carrying the folder. Can we talk? I was folding clothes. Sure. He sat on the edge of the bed. Yesterday got ugly. No. Yesterday got honest. He ignored that. I know you're hurt. Hurt is when you forget an anniversary. He looked down. I was under pressure. So you sold something that wasn't yours. His head snapped up. What does that mean? I folded another shirt. You tell me. Sarah. Whose name is on the land deed? His face changed. Finally. It was almost satisfying watching memory return. My understanding was, no, don't give me your understanding. Give me a name. He stood. We built this house together. On whose land? That doesn't mean I have no rights. I never said you had no rights. Then what's your point? My point is that you transferred your rights. Not mine. He stared at me. I continued folding. You took $200,000 from your mother based on an arrangement involving property you couldn't independently transfer. Daniel said. I've read Daniel's correspondence. Silence. Absolute silence. Michael's face drained of color. You talked to Daniel? No. I placed the shirt into my suitcase. My attorney did. Your attorney? Yes. He looked at the suitcase. Why are you packing? I finally looked at him. Because you were right about one thing. What? One of us needs an apartment. Michael followed me downstairs. Karen was watching television. Mom, turn that off. She frowned. What? Turn it off. Something in his voice made her obey. I placed the folder on the coffee table. Karen looked from me to Michael. What happened? I sat across from her. Karen, did Michael tell you that I own the land? Her eyes narrowed. What land? The land underneath this house. She laughed nervously. Don't be ridiculous. Did he tell you? She looked at Michael. He said nothing. That was her answer. Karen stood. You told me the property was yours. Michael raised both hands. The house is partly mine. That isn't what you said. I put money into it. You said you could transfer it. I can transfer my interest. What does that mean? I watched the alliance collapse in real time. Karen turned toward me. Are you saying this house belongs to you? The property is titled solely in my name. Her mouth opened. I continued. Michael had contractual financial rights connected to improvements. Apparently, he assigned whatever portion was assignable. To me. Possibly. So I own part of the house. You may own an interest with a value that lawyers can spend months arguing about. Her face reddened. But you don't own my land. Michael stepped between us. Everybody needs to calm down. Karen spun toward him. You took my money. You invested it. You told me I was buying security. You are. Then why is your wife telling me she owns the property? I leaned back. For once, I didn't need revenge. The truth was doing excellent work by itself. Karen left the room crying. Michael blamed me. That was predictable. You enjoyed that. I stared at him. Excuse me. You wanted to humiliate her. I asked whether you told her the truth. You could have handled it privately. I actually laughed. Privately? You moved her into my home while I was caring for my father. She sold her condo. Because of what you told her. He stopped. I stepped closer. This is the part you still don't understand, Michael. You betrayed both of us. I was trying to save my company. There it was. Finally. No mother. No stairs. No doctors. No family duty. His company. How bad is it? He looked away. How bad? We lost 2 major contracts. And? Cash flow collapsed. And? He sat down. We owe suppliers. How much? He didn't answer. I waited. Michael. About $310,000. I felt sick. Does that include your mother's money? No. So even after taking $200,000 from her, you're still hundreds of thousands underwater? It's temporary. People in financial trouble love that word. Temporary. As if a softer adjective can erase a number. Did you use any of our joint savings? No. I studied his face. He couldn't look at me. Michael. Silence. How much? 35. 35,000? He nodded. That was when I stopped thinking about saving my marriage. Because betrayal can sometimes be repaired. But betrayal followed by lie after lie becomes a decision. I called Rebecca the next morning. I want out. She didn't ask whether I was sure. Good attorneys rarely do when you've already reached that tone of voice. Divorce? Yes. Then before you say another word to Michael, we document everything. For the next 3 days, I did exactly that. Bank statements. Company records available to me. Property documents. Texts. Emails. Photographs of Karen's belongings throughout the house. The transfer papers. Michael's message claiming I had approved the plan. Every lie became a file. Every file became evidence. Meanwhile, Michael tried kindness. Flowers appeared Tuesday. I left them on the counter. Wednesday, he offered to cook dinner. I ate with my father. Thursday, he texted me from downstairs. Can we please start over? I stared at those words for a long time. Start over. 11 years reduced to a button he wanted to press because consequences had finally arrived. I typed. We can start with complete financial disclosure. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Why are you talking like a lawyer? I smiled. Because I have one. He didn't answer. That afternoon, Rebecca filed the first documents. Michael was served the following morning. He called me 12 times. I answered the 13th. How could you do this? His voice was shaking. I looked at the photograph of my father on my desk. Then I said the sentence he deserved. I learned from you, Michael. And I hung up. Karen confronted me that evening. She had been crying. For once, she didn't look superior. She looked frightened. Are you divorcing him? Yes. What happens to my money? I don't know. You do know. No, Karen. That's between you, Michael, his company, and your attorneys. This is your fault. I stared at her. My fault. If you had just agreed to move, none of this would have happened. There are statements so absurd they clarify everything. I had spent years trying to earn Karen's approval. Hosting Christmas. Remembering birthdays. Driving her to appointments. Listening to criticism disguised as advice. And even now, after her son lied to both of us, she needed me to be the villain. So I stopped trying. You need to move out. Her mouth dropped open. What? My attorney will send formal notice according to whatever occupancy rights apply. But I'm telling you now so you can prepare. You can't throw an elderly woman onto the street. You have hundreds of thousands of dollars from your condo sale. I gave Michael $200,000. That was your decision. He deceived me. Yes. She stared at me. For 1 second, I thought she finally understood. Then she whispered, "You're going to destroy my son." I shook my head. No. I walked toward the stairs. Your son made decisions. I looked back at her. For the first time in his life, you're going to let him live with them. The next few weeks were ugly. Michael hired his own attorney. Karen hired another. Suddenly, the family that had been united in deciding my future couldn't agree on anything. Karen demanded her money back. Michael said the money had been invested. Her attorney argued she had relied on misleading representations. Michael's attorney argued she had understood the risks. And my attorney kept repeating one beautiful fact. I had signed nothing. Not one transfer. Not one authorization. Not one waiver. The land remained mine. Michael's claimed interests had to be valued according to our existing agreements and applicable marital property rules, but Karen had not magically become owner of my home because they had signed papers at a kitchen table. Then Rebecca found something even more important. Sarah, remember the original construction agreement? Of course. There is a clause restricting assignment without written consent. I sat forward. Mine, yours as property owner. And I never gave it. No. What does that do? It creates another serious problem for Michael's transfer. I closed my eyes. Years earlier, my father had insisted on that clause. Michael had complained about the legal fees. Dad had refused to remove it. Protect what belongs to you, sweetheart. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I understood. My father hadn't distrusted Michael. He had simply understood something I hadn't. Love is not a substitute for paperwork. Michael asked to meet me at a coffee shop. I agreed because Rebecca said there was no harm in listening. He looked terrible. His beard had grown out. His shirt was wrinkled. For 11 years, I would have reached across the table and fixed his collar. I kept my hands around my coffee. I made mistakes, he said. That's a small word. I panicked. You lied. I thought I could fix everything before you came home. That sentence hurt more than I expected. So the plan was never to ask me. He looked down. You would have said no. Yes. I knew that. Exactly. He rubbed his eyes. Mom was willing to help the company only if she had security. So you offered mine. I thought my interest in the house was enough. No. You thought I would eventually give in. He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. I know you, Sarah. I stared at him. Apparently you don't. You always compromise. Not anymore. His eyes filled. I don't want to lose you. I felt sadness then. Real sadness. Because there had been good years. Vacations. Sunday mornings. Inside jokes. Hospital waiting rooms. 11 Christmases. Love doesn't disappear simply because trust does. But love without trust becomes memory. I didn't leave you, Michael. He looked hopeful. Then I finished. You left our marriage the moment you made a deal that required my silence instead of my consent. Karen moved out 6 weeks later. She didn't go quietly. The final morning, a moving company filled the driveway. I stood in the kitchen while workers carried out her boxes. She walked toward me holding my blue coffee mug. For one ridiculous second, I thought she was going to take it. Instead, she placed it on the counter. I suppose you're happy. No. She looked surprised. You won. This isn't winning. You kept the house. I kept property that was already mine. And Michael. He'll be responsible for whatever the court determines. Her lips trembled. He may lose his business. I know. You could help him. There it was again. My resources. My sacrifice. My responsibility. Karen, when exactly does Michael become responsible for Michael? She looked away. I softened my voice. He lied to you too. He was desperate. Yes. He's my son. I know. I can't abandon him. I never asked you to. She looked at me for a long moment. Then something strange happened. Karen nodded. Not agreement. Not apology. Just acknowledgement. Maybe for the first time, she understood that loving someone and rescuing them from every consequence were not the same thing. She walked out. The moving truck pulled away an hour later. I stood alone in the living room. My house looked empty. But for the first time in years, it also felt quiet. The divorce took 9 months. There was no dramatic courtroom confession. No judge slammed a gavel and declared me victorious. Real justice is usually slower than that. Accountants valued Michael's company. Attorneys traced money. Karen pursued her own claim over the $200,000. Michael's attempted transfer became part of a much larger financial dispute. Eventually, we reached a settlement. Michael surrendered his remaining contractual claims connected to the property as part of the broader division of assets. I kept the land and the house. He kept what remained of his company. He also accepted responsibility for certain business debts that belonged to him. Our joint accounts were divided according to the settlement. Karen recovered part of her money through a separate agreement with Michael. Not all of it. Enough to buy a small townhouse. I heard she chose one without stairs. There was an irony there I decided not to examine too closely. Michael's company survived. Barely. He downsized from 12 employees to 5. For a while, I wondered whether I should feel guilty. Then Rebecca said something I'll never forget. Consequences aren't revenge, Sarah. She was right. I hadn't destroyed his business. I hadn't taken Karen's condo. I hadn't created their agreement. I had simply refused to sacrifice myself to make their decisions painless. That distinction changed everything. A year after the divorce became final, Michael emailed me. I almost deleted it. Instead, I opened it. Sarah, I've rewritten this about 20 times. I'm not asking you to come back. I know that door is closed. I just want to say something I should have said a long time ago. You were right. I spent years assuming you'd absorb whatever pressure I couldn't handle. Mom needed something, you adjusted. The company needed something, you adjusted. I needed something, you adjusted. Eventually, I stopped seeing your compromises as gifts and started treating them like obligations. What I did with the house was the worst version of that. I'm sorry, Michael. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him. I didn't. In some strange way, his apology gave me something I hadn't realized I wanted. Confirmation. For months, people had asked whether I regretted ending an 11-year marriage over a house. But it had never been about a house. It was about being treated like the final signature on decisions everyone else had already made. It was about discovering that my kindness had been mistaken for permission. And it was about finally understanding that saying no didn't make me cruel. Sometimes no is simply the sound a boundary makes when it finally locks. I renovated the living room that spring. Nothing dramatic. New paint. Different curtains. I moved my reading chair beside the window. My father's photograph went back onto the mantel. And I put my blue coffee mug on the shelf where it belonged. Dad visited after his recovery. He walked slowly through the house, inspecting everything like he always did. When he reached the backyard, he stood looking at the old maple tree near the property line. Your grandmother planted that, he said. I know. You almost sold this place once. I remembered. 3 years before everything happened, Michael had wanted to move closer to the city. I had resisted. Now I understood why. This land carried memories older than my marriage. My grandmother's garden. My father's summer barbecues. My childhood dog buried beneath the oak tree. Michael had seen property. Karen had seen security. I had forgotten that I was allowed to see home. Dad looked at me. You okay? I smiled. I am now. He nodded toward the house. Good thing we kept those documents. I laughed. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Nope. Then his expression became serious. Paper didn't save you, Sarah. What did? You finally believing you were worth protecting. I looked away because suddenly I was crying. 2 years later, I saw Karen at a grocery store. I almost turned down another aisle. She saw me first. Sarah. Karen. She looked older. Softer somehow. We exchanged the awkward questions people ask when they share too much history. How's your father? Fine. How's work? Busy. Then I asked, how's Michael? She hesitated. Better. I nodded. I'm glad. He's seeing someone. The information surprised me less than I expected. Good for him. Karen studied my face as though searching for jealousy. She didn't find any. Then she said, I owe you an apology. I didn't speak. I shouldn't have moved into that house. No. I believed Michael when he said everything was settled. I know. But I also didn't want to ask too many questions. That was surprisingly honest. She looked down at her shopping cart. I wanted the house. There it was. I know. And I thought you'd give in. I smiled sadly. So did Michael. She nodded. I'm sorry. I could have punished her in that moment. I could have reminded her of every insult, every smug smile, every box she had moved into my home. Instead, I said, thank you. Because forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. Sometimes it simply means you no longer need the other person to suffer before you can move forward. People love revenge stories because they imagine revenge feels like fireworks. It doesn't. At least mine didn't. There was no champagne when Michael moved out. No celebration when Karen's truck left. No triumphant music when the divorce papers arrived. There was grief. There was anger. There were nights when I wondered whether I had been too harsh. Then I would remember arriving home from my father's surgery and finding another woman's furniture in my living room. I would remember Michael saying, we've decided Mom should have the house. We've decided. 2 words. Those 2 words ended my marriage before either of us understood it. Because there should never have been a we making decisions about my life while I stood outside the room. Today, the house is still mine. But that isn't the ending I'm proudest of. The ending I'm proudest of is simpler. I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. I stopped confusing peace with surrender. I stopped allowing people to call me selfish whenever I refused to solve problems they created. And I learned something I wish I'd understood at 30 instead of 42. You can love people deeply and still refuse to let them use you. You can forgive someone and still never trust them again. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't taking everything from the people who betrayed you. It's taking yourself back.